Welcome back to the Friday Five for January 19th, 2024. My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm a business law and estate planning attorney, offices in Edina, Minnesota and New York City. Let's take a quick look at 5 questions from the week, about 5 minutes long, FAQ style. Maybe they're questions that you've wondered about in the past. Question number 1 this week: can I rent out my second home without putting it into an LLC? This is a very common question I get, mainly because a lot of people have seen my videos about creating an LLC for your rental property, and when they call, they assume that that's the only way to rent out your property. So in this case, the caller and I had a good discussion about the various pros and cons of putting your property into an LLC and then being able to rent it out. So the simple answer is you don't have to do an LLC to rent out the property, but what most callers are concerned about is the liability they would have if the property is not an LLC. And the answer you can look to is, what is the insurance coverage on that property? So if you're not able to put the property into an LLC, there can be a variety of reasons, like the mortgage lender will not allow it. If that's the case you run into, what you can do is make sure that your liability coverage on your property is either maxed out or is at a significant level that you feel comfortable in case there is any lawsuit over the property. So in that case, you don't have to necessarily create an LLC. You won't get the liability advantages. You won't get some of the tax advantages that you may have, but you can still rent out the property and be a little less concerned about your personal assets being put at risk. And you do want to remember that if you're going to rent out that property, make sure you've created a lease, a proper rental agreement that's in writing and signed by you and the tenant, so you have a clear, set definition of what that lease looks like. It's not just a handshake agreement that can come back to bite you down the road. Question 2 this week: do I get access to all the books and records when I buy a business? In this case, we actually have a small transaction between a mother and her daughter. The mother is selling the business to the daughter, who was a little bit concerned about what she would have access to after she became the owner of the company. And the simple answer is you get access to those books and records, the past tax returns, the bank accounts. All these records should be part of that transaction where you purchase the business. If you're buying a business from somebody who will not give you access to books and records, they won't give you back tax returns, that's a big red flag about that transaction, and you may want to think about whether or not you want to go through with it. You may be buying a company with significant liabilities, or maybe not the assets you thought you were buying, and so without those documents, without access to those records, that deal may not be worth whatever you're putting into it. So no matter what kind of transaction it is, when you're buying a business, make sure you have access to the records so you understand what you're buying and that you're paying the proper amount for that business. Question 3 this week: how do I collect a small amount of money that's owed to my LLC? So there's a challenging part of the law, and that is when you're owed a smaller balance, let's say $200 to about, frankly, $5,000, maybe a little bit more. And the question we have when we're owed that little bit of money to our business: should we hire a lawyer? Should we bring a lawsuit for this kind of debt? Now, when you're looking at something like $200 or $300, the problem you'll run into is a lawyer's going to cost a lot more per hour to do that kind of debt. And that's why we have small claims courts in most states and most cities. And you want to look to where's the defendant located, the person you want to sue, and look at what the small claims court will allow you to do. Now, the challenge here is if you have an LLC or you have a company that needs to sue somebody on a small debt, normally you have to have a lawyer represent the company in court. You can't do it yourself. However, look at the small claims courts that you're going to be involved in, because some of them provide an exception for businesses to be represented by the owner when the debt is under a certain amount. So you'll see plenty of videos, including my own out there, about the importance of having a business attorney represent you in these litigations. But when the debts are very small and it doesn't make financial sense to bring in an attorney, look to see if the court will allow you to represent the company. Question 4 this week: how do I tell if I need a prenup? I had a nice long discussion the other day with somebody who's getting married, and we went through their assets and their fiance's assets, and we looked at what are the pros and cons of entering into a prenuptial agreement before you get married. Now, before we even get to the pros and cons, you need to start with a discussion with your fiance about a prenuptial agreement and see whether or not they want one or not. Because if they are adamantly opposed to getting a prenuptial agreement, then you need to understand what it looks like to marry someone without a prenup versus pushing with them to make sure a prenup is actually drafted. And you'll want to look at your assets, your liabilities, look at the reasons why you want to enter into that prenup. Talk to an attorney so you can go through the pros and cons of a prenuptial agreement in the state where you're going to be living after you're married. This is one of the other questions we went through is if you're married in one state, but then you're moving to a different state, how is the prenup going to be enforced if a divorce comes about? And usually your prenuptial agreement will say, this is the law of the state that's going to be enforced when we have a divorce, and the law we're going to apply to that prenuptial agreement. So the simple answer for how to tell if you need a prenup is schedule that time and have a 1-hour consultation or however long it takes with an attorney in your state to make sure you understand what a prenup does versus what the default law is in the state where you're getting married and you're going to live. And question 5 this week, how long does it take to prepare an estate plan? And this is a very common question. My answer is it's all going to depend upon you, the client, and how much time and effort you put into the estate plan. Now, that's not to say that you won't have time and put in more effort than somebody else, but it really is a matter of how long will it take you to understand the documents. So the common answer I give when this comes up in phone calls is you can hire me on Monday and we can sign it by Wednesday. You could hire me on Monday, we could sign it Tuesday. But for most of my clients, the time period ends up being about a 2 to 6 week period between when we get started and when the documents are finally signed. And that 2 to 6 week spread usually is how long it takes the client to review the documents, be comfortable with what they're signing, getting all of their questions answered, and then also some time to set up an appointment on the calendar where we can know we have 2 witnesses and a notary public available. So if you're looking for a rule of thumb, it's really going to depend upon your working relationship with your attorney. Again, with my office, it's usually about a 2 to 6 week period for us to get started and get an estate plan signed. So those are our 5 questions for the week. It's been bitterly cold here in Minnesota. We've hardly gotten out of the single digits, many days actually below 0. So wherever you are, if it's that cold, I hope things warm up for you. If you like this video, you can hit the like button or the thumbs up button below. You can subscribe to future episodes on YouTube. You can always submit a question for future episodes in a link below. If you'd like more information about my law firm or my practice, you can go to 𝙃𝙀𝙊𝙒.com. We can also set up a legal strategy session and get your questions answered directly. Wherever you are, stay warm, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.